The Carter family dining room was full that night, relatives' laughter, crystal glasses raised to celebrate the baby on the way. Then Adam Carter stood up. His voice cut through the room with calm cruelty. "A daughter doesn't carry the Carter name," he said, glancing coldly at his pregnant wife. "And a wife who can't give this family a son doesn't belong in this house." No one stopped him. Alexis Turner stood quietly, one hand resting over her stomach while 20 people watched her humiliation. Adam believed he had just removed a disappointment from his life. What he didn't know was that the woman he had just thrown out was about to inherit $500 million. Before this story unfolds, take a moment to tell me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. Stories like this remind us that dignity often speaks the quietest and yet lasts the longest. If you believe respect should never depend on someone's gender, consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss the rest of this story. Because what happened to Alexis that night was only the beginning. Long before the Carter family dinner ended in silence and humiliation, Alexis Turner had already learned that the quietest person in a room often noticed the most. She was 29 years old, calm by nature, observant by habit. People sometimes mistook her silence for weakness. In reality, it was patience. Alexis worked part-time as an accountant for a small medical supply company in Houston. The job wasn't glamorous, but it suited her. Numbers had a clarity that people often lacked. Balance sheets either made sense or they didn't. Life, however, rarely followed such rules. Her co-workers described her as reliable. She arrived early, spoke little during office gossip, and left with neat stacks of completed reports. At her desk sat two things that rarely moved: a slim silver laptop and a small black notebook. The notebook was Alexis's quiet ritual. Whenever something felt important, an unusual comment, a financial detail, a moment that seemed slightly out of place, she wrote it down. Not because she expected trouble, but because she preferred clarity. Her husband, Adam Carter, had once joked about it during the early months of their marriage. "You writing a novel about me?" he asked one evening while loosening his tie. Alexis had smiled faintly. "No, just remembering things." Adam laughed and kissed her forehead. At the time, he seemed amused by her habit. Back then, everything still felt normal. Adam Carter was 32 and ambitious in the way many self-made businessmen were. He owned a mid-sized real estate development company called Carter Development. The company wasn't among the largest firms in Texas, but Adam carried himself as if it soon would be. He spoke often about growth, expansion, legacy. Those words appeared frequently in his conversations. But the word that surfaced most often inside the Carter household was simpler: heir. The Carter family had lived in Texas for generations. Adam's parents owned a large home outside Houston, a property that symbolized stability and tradition. Family gatherings happened regularly there: Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, business discussions that slowly drifted into family expectations. And at the center of those expectations stood Adam's mother, Margaret Carter. Margaret was a woman who rarely raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her authority came from certainty. She believed in order, in legacy, in the continuation of the Carter name. During Alexis's first Thanksgiving dinner with the family after the wedding, Margaret had studied her with polite interest. "You're an accountant, correct?" Margaret asked. "Yes," Alexis replied. "That's practical." Margaret nodded slightly before adding almost casually, "The Carter family has always valued practical women, women who understand responsibility." Alexis simply nodded. She understood that sentence meant more than it appeared. Over time, Margaret's expectations became clearer. The Carter name, she often said, had lasted through 4 generations. "It deserves to continue," she would add, while pouring tea. At first, those comments floated through conversations like harmless traditions, but slowly they gained weight. One evening, several months into the marriage, Adam came home later than usual. He tossed his keys onto the kitchen counter and sighed. "Long day?" Alexis asked while preparing dinner. "Investors," he said. "Everyone wants guarantees." She handed him a glass of water. Adam leaned against the counter and looked at her for a moment. "You know what this company needs eventually," he said. "What a future Carter running it." Alexis understood the meaning instantly. "A child," she said. "A son," Adam corrected gently. At the time, Alexis didn't argue, not because she agreed, but because she preferred to observe before responding. Weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Alexis sat in her doctor's office, holding a small printed test result. Pregnant. The word looked almost unreal. For a long moment, Alexis stared at it while her mind moved through possibilities. A child meant change, responsibility, and she knew expectations. When she told Adam that evening, his reaction was immediate and energetic. "Are you serious?" he asked. Alexis nodded. For a moment, Adam looked genuinely happy. He laughed, lifted her slightly off the ground, and hugged her tightly. "That's incredible," he said, and for a few weeks it truly seemed like it was. Adam spoke enthusiastically about the future. He searched for larger houses online. He mentioned private schools. He told his parents almost immediately. Margaret Carter reacted with composed excitement. "Well," she said at the family dinner that weekend, "that is very good news." Her eyes moved briefly toward Alexis's stomach. "The Carter family may soon have its next generation." But soon, another sentence began appearing in conversations. At first it came lightly. Adam would say it jokingly. "We'll see if it's a boy." Margaret would smile politely. "Let's hope." At the time, Alexis told herself it was harmless tradition, but repetition has a way of sharpening words. Within a month, the comments became more direct. During one Sunday dinner, Margaret placed her fork down carefully. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "boys often take after their fathers." Adam chuckled. "That's the hope." Margaret turned to Alexis. "Carrying the family name forward matters." Alexis nodded politely. She didn't respond. Later that night, after they returned home, Alexis opened her notebook. She wrote a single sentence. "Margaret. Carrying the family name forward matters." Not because she felt threatened, but because she had begun noticing a pattern. The next doctor's appointment arrived a few weeks later. The ultrasound room was quiet, dimly lit, filled with the soft hum of medical equipment. Adam sat beside the examination table. Alexis watched the monitor carefully. The technician moved the scanner slowly across her stomach. Adam leaned forward. "Can you tell if it's a boy yet?" he asked. The technician gave a small professional smile. "It's still early," she said, "but we might have an idea." Adam's attention sharpened immediately. Alexis noticed the way his fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. The technician studied the screen for a moment. "Well," she said carefully, "it appears most likely to be a girl." The room remained quiet. For a moment, no one spoke. Alexis looked at the image on the screen. A small shape. A small life. Her daughter. Adam leaned back slowly. His expression didn't show anger, but the excitement that had filled his voice for weeks quietly disappeared. On the drive home, the car remained silent for several minutes. Finally, Adam spoke. "Well," he said, keeping his eyes on the road, "ultrasounds can be wrong sometimes." "Sometimes," Alexis replied. Adam nodded once. "My family needs a son, eventually," he said after a moment. The sentence hung in the air between them. Alexis turned her gaze toward the passing highway lights. She didn't argue. Instead, she waited. When they arrived home, Adam walked upstairs without another word. Alexis remained in the kitchen for a while. The house was quiet. She opened her notebook again. Under the previous entries, she wrote carefully. "Adam, my family needs a son. Then she closed the notebook and placed it back in the drawer. Outside, the Texas night was still. Inside the Carter home, something subtle had already begun to shift, and Alexis Turner, as always, was paying attention. The ultrasound appointment had lasted less than 30 minutes, but the silence that followed it stretched much longer. In the days after the doctor mentioned the baby was most likely a girl, Alexis noticed a change that was subtle enough to deny, yet clear enough to feel. Adam Carter did not say much about it, but he also stopped talking about the baby. Just a week earlier, he had spent evenings browsing nursery designs online. He had spoken about baseball gloves, business schools, and how a Carter boy would one day run Carter Development. Now those conversations disappeared. The laptop stayed closed. The nursery discussion faded. And Alexis, as always, watched. She noticed the small pauses in Adam's tone when family members asked about the pregnancy. She noticed how he corrected people when they used the word baby. Hopefully, son, he would say casually. The word hopefully appeared more often. Alexis did not challenge him, not because she didn't care, but because she had learned that some truths revealed themselves more clearly when left alone. One evening, about 2 weeks after the ultrasound, Adam invited Alexis to dinner at his parents' house. Margaret Carter had prepared one of her carefully organized family gatherings. The Carter dining room always looked the same. Polished wooden table, white porcelain plates, perfectly folded napkins. Margaret believed meals should reflect order. Alexis arrived wearing a simple navy dress. Her pregnancy was not yet visible to strangers, but Alexis could feel the quiet shift in her body and awareness of the life growing inside her. Margaret greeted them at the door. "Good evening," she said calmly. Her eyes briefly lowered to Alexis's stomach before returning to her face. "How are you feeling?" Good, Alexis replied. "That's important." Margaret nodded and led them to the dining room. Adam's father, Richard Carter, sat at the end of the table reading something on his tablet. Richard rarely involved himself deeply in family discussions. His presence was quiet, distant. Adam's younger cousin Tyler was already there as well, talking about college football. For a few minutes, the dinner moved normally. Plates were passed, water glasses filled, polite conversation filled the room. Then Margaret asked the question Alexis had expected since the ultrasound. Did the doctor say anything about the baby? Yet Adam answered before Alexis could speak. They think it might be a girl. Margaret paused. Not dramatically, just long enough for the silence to be noticed. Well, she said slowly, those tests are not always accurate. Adam nodded slightly. That's what I told Alexis. Margaret folded her napkin neatly on her lap. The Carter family has always been fortunate with sons, she said. Your grandfather had 3. Alexis listened quietly. Margaret turned toward her with a composed expression. Of course, she added, sometimes nature takes patience. No one at the table reacted strongly. But the meaning of the sentence settled across the room. Alexis noticed Richard Carter shift slightly in his chair as if uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Tyler pretended to focus on his food. Adam remained calm, but Alexis could hear the quiet expectation beneath his silence. Margaret continued eating as if the conversation had been entirely normal. And if it is a girl, she added a moment later, there will always be another chance. Alexis set her fork down carefully. She did not respond, but she remembered. That night when they returned home, Alexis opened her notebook again. She wrote Margaret, if it is a girl, there will always be another chance. The sentence looked simple on the page, but Alexis knew it carried weight. Over the next few weeks, the comments did not stop. Sometimes they appeared during phone calls, sometimes during dinner, sometimes casually, almost like jokes. One afternoon, Adam stood in the kitchen scrolling through something on his phone. Did you know, he said casually, that most family businesses fail by the 3rd generation? Alexis glanced up. I didn't. Adam nodded. That's why strong succession matters. He paused. A son learns differently from a father. Alexis watched him quietly. Daughters learn differently, she asked calmly. Adam hesitated. Not exactly, he said. Just differently. The conversation ended there. Later that night, Alexis wrote down the exchange. Not because she felt angry, but because patterns mattered. Another evening, Alexis accidentally overheard a conversation between Adam and Margaret on speakerphone. She had been walking past Adam's office when Margaret's voice carried through the door. Adam, you must think long-term. I know, Mom. The Carter name depends on it. I said I know, and Alexis understands that Adam didn't answer immediately. Then he said something that Alexis remembered clearly. She will. Alexis stood in the hallway quietly. Then she returned to the bedroom without interrupting. That night she wrote another line in her notebook. Adam, she will. Weeks passed. The pregnancy continued normally. Alexis attended her medical appointments. She took vitamins. She continued working part-time. At the office, her co-workers congratulated her warmly. Do you know what you're having? Yet one of them asked. A girl, Alexis said. That's wonderful. And Alexis believed that. But inside the Carter household, the tone remained different. Margaret called more frequently. Adam spent longer hours at work. Conversations about the baby rarely lasted long. Until one evening, when the tension finally surfaced openly. It happened during another family dinner. Margaret had invited several relatives. The table was full again. Halfway through the meal, Margaret placed her fork down. You know, she said thoughtfully, families survive through continuity. Adam nodded slowly. That's true. Margaret looked toward Alexis. A daughter brings joy, she said carefully, but a son carries responsibility. The room grew quiet. Alexis noticed Richard Carter look down at his plate. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Adam did not interrupt his mother. Instead, he leaned back slightly and added, My company will need leadership someday. Margaret smiled faintly. Exactly. Alexis rested one hand lightly against the table. The baby moved gently inside her. For a moment, she felt a quiet wave of protectiveness. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. When dinner ended and the guests left, Alexis and Adam drove home together. The car ride was silent again. Finally, Adam spoke. Mom didn't mean anything harsh tonight. Alexis looked out the window. I didn't think she did. Adam nodded. She just believes in tradition. Alexis turned toward him. And you? Adam kept his eyes on the road. I believe the Carter family should continue. The words were calm, certain, almost rehearsed. Alexis did not respond. Instead, she watched the passing streetlights through the window. Later that night, she opened her notebook again. Under the growing list of entries, she wrote carefully, Adam, the Carter family should continue. She closed the notebook slowly, placed it back in the drawer, and turned off the light. Somewhere far away in a city Alexis had not visited in years, another story had already begun moving toward her. But inside the Carter household, the pressure was only beginning to build, and the quiet storm that would eventually explode at the Carter family dinner was already forming. Alexis Turner, silent and observant, continued to watch it unfold. Pressure rarely arrives all at once. More often, it grows slowly, quietly, until one day it becomes impossible to ignore. By the time Alexis Turner entered her 5th month of pregnancy, the Carter household had changed in ways that no one openly acknowledged. But Alexis noticed. She noticed the absence of warmth that had once existed between her and Adam. She noticed how conversations about the baby were no longer joyful. They were measured, careful, sometimes avoided entirely. And she noticed that Margaret Carter had begun calling more often. At first, the calls sounded polite. How are you feeling today? Margaret would ask. Good Alexis would reply. Pregnancy can be tiring. It can. But Margaret never ended the conversation there. There was always a second layer. A careful suggestion. A reminder. One afternoon, Margaret visited the house unexpectedly. Alexis had been sitting at the dining table, reviewing a small stack of accounting reports from work when the doorbell rang. Margaret stood outside, wearing her usual composed expression. "I was in the area," she said when Alexis opened the door. Alexis knew Margaret rarely did anything without intention, but she welcomed her inside. They sat together in the living room. Margaret's eyes moved briefly around the house before settling on Alexis. "You look well," she said. "Thank you." Margaret folded her hands in her lap. "Pregnancy brings responsibility." Alexis nodded. "Yes." Margaret paused as if considering how to phrase her next thought. "You know," she said slowly, "when Adam was born, his father already had plans for him." Alexis listened. "Plans?" she asked. Margaret smiled faintly. "The Carter family has always believed in preparing the next generation early." She leaned slightly forward. "A son learns from watching his father." The sentence hung in the air. Alexis responded carefully. "A daughter can learn as well." Margaret did not disagree, but she also did not accept the statement. "Yes," Margaret said. "But daughters eventually marry into other families." The words were gentle, but their meaning was not. Alexis felt the baby move faintly beneath her hand. For a moment, she simply listened to the silence that followed. Then she said quietly, "This child will still be Adam's." Margaret studied her for a moment. Then she smiled politely. "Of course." The conversation ended soon after. Margaret left with the same calm dignity she always carried, but the message remained. That evening, Alexis opened her notebook again. She wrote carefully, "Margaret daughters eventually marry into other families." The page was beginning to fill with sentences that all carried the same quiet direction. Expectation. Pressure. Condition. Over the next few weeks, the tension spread beyond Margaret. It reached Adam as well. At first, his changes were subtle. He worked later. He answered emails during dinner. He canceled plans more often. Alexis rarely complained, but she noticed. One evening, while Alexis prepared dinner, Adam walked into the kitchen, looking distracted. "I might have to travel next month," he said. "For work?" Alexis asked. "Investors?" Alexis nodded. Adam opened the refrigerator and stared inside without really looking. "You know," he said suddenly, "business succession is complicated." Alexis glanced at him. "How so?" Adam closed the refrigerator door. "Family companies depend on continuity." Alexis wiped her hands on a towel. "Your father didn't run Carter Development. That was different." Adam leaned against the counter. "My grandfather started the foundation of the business. And your father, he expanded it." Adam paused. "And I built the company." Alexis understood where the conversation was going. "And someday someone else will run it," she said. Adam nodded slowly. "Exactly." He hesitated before adding, "That person needs to carry the Carter name." Alexis did not answer. Adam seemed to expect some reaction, but none came. Later that night, Alexis added another entry to her notebook. "Adam. That person needs to carry the Carter name." The words looked familiar because they echoed everything Margaret had been saying for months. Soon the pressure became more direct. One Sunday afternoon, the family gathered again at Margaret's house. This time the atmosphere felt less like celebration and more like evaluation. Margaret had invited several extended relatives. The living room was full. Conversation moved from sports to politics to family updates. Eventually someone asked Alexis about the pregnancy. "How far along are you now?" an aunt asked kindly. 5 months, Alexis replied. "Do you know the gender yet?" Alexis answered calmly. "The doctor believes it's a girl." The reaction around the room varied. Some smiled warmly, but Margaret remained silent. Adam shifted slightly beside Alexis. After a moment, Margaret spoke. "Well, she said healthy children are always a blessing." Then she added carefully, "But families must also think about the future." The room quieted slightly. Margaret continued speaking in her measured voice. "The Carter family has responsibilities." She glanced toward Adam. "Our name has been tied to business property and reputation for generations." Alexis noticed the way several relatives avoided eye contact. Margaret turned her attention back to Alexis. "A son understands those responsibilities differently." Alexis rested her hand lightly over her stomach. She could feel the baby moving again, and suddenly the conversation no longer felt abstract. It felt personal. Still she remained calm. "Responsibility is taught," Alexis said. Margaret smiled politely. Sometimes. Adam did not interrupt the conversation. He sat quietly beside Alexis, and that silence spoke louder than words. The evening ended without argument, but the atmosphere remained heavy. On the drive home, Alexis looked out the window while Adam drove. Finally, Adam said something that surprised her. "Mom just worries about the future." Alexis turned slightly toward him. "And you?" Adam did not answer immediately. The car passed beneath several highway lights. Then he said quietly, "I built Carter Development from almost nothing." Alexis listened, and someday Adam continued, "I want someone to carry it forward." The sentence sounded reasonable, almost logical, but Alexis understood what was missing from it. Not once had Adam said the word child. Only son. She nodded slowly. "I understand." Adam seemed relieved by her answer, but Alexis knew understanding did not mean agreement. That night, when she returned home, she opened her notebook once again. The list of recorded sentences had grown longer than she expected. Each one was small, each one simple, but together they told a story. She wrote the final line for the night. "Margaret families must think about the future." Then she closed the notebook. Outside the house, the Texas air was warm and still. Inside, the Carter marriage was beginning to shift in ways that neither Adam nor Margaret fully understood. Because Alexis Turner was not arguing, she was not fighting, she was not defending herself with words. She was doing something far quieter. She was remembering. And sometimes the quietest witnesses carry the clearest records. Records that one day would matter more than anyone in the Carter family expected. The Carter family gathering that night was larger than usual. Margaret Carter had insisted on organizing it herself. She had spent 2 days preparing the house, polishing the dining table, arranging flowers, instructing the caterer where every dish should be placed. To anyone outside the family, it looked like a celebration. After all, Adam and Alexis were expecting their first child. Relatives from across Houston had arrived. A few cousins had driven from Dallas. Adam's uncle had even flown in from Arizona. The Carter home was full of voices, but beneath the polite conversation, something else was waiting. Alexis noticed it the moment she stepped through the door. Margaret greeted her politely, but the warmth that usually accompanied family celebrations was missing. "You're right on time," Margaret said calmly. Alexis nodded. Adam stood beside her, already shaking hands with relatives. Someone brought Alexis a glass of sparkling water. Someone else asked about the pregnancy. Alexis answered politely. Yes, she felt well. Yes, the baby was healthy. Yes, the due date was early autumn. But Alexis also noticed something unusual. Several relatives looked at her with quiet curiosity, as if they were waiting for something to happen. The dinner began shortly afterward. The long table was filled with dishes. Margaret had carefully arranged roasted chicken, vegetables, homemade bread. For the first half hour, everything seemed normal. People talked about work sports travel. Adam's cousin Tyler described a new job opportunity. Richard Carter discussed property taxes. Laughter appeared here and there. Then halfway through the meal, Adam stood up. The movement was subtle, but it immediately drew attention. Adam rarely stood during family dinners. The room quieted. Adam lifted his glass. "I want to say a few words," he said. His voice was calm, confident. Margaret looked pleased. Alexis sat quietly beside him, one hand resting lightly against her stomach. Adam smiled toward the guests. "As everyone here knows," he said, "our family has always believed in tradition." Several relatives nodded. Adam continued. "The Carter name has meant something in this city for generations." The room remained attentive. "And family," Adam added, "is what protects that legacy." Alexis listened. His speech sounded prepared, almost rehearsed. Adam glanced briefly toward her before continuing. "When Alexis and I first learned we were expecting a child, I was proud." His voice was steady, but as time passed, something became clear. A quiet tension moved through the room. Adam placed his glass on the table. "My family deserves an heir." The word echoed through the dining room. Heir. Alexis felt several pairs of eyes shift toward her. Adam continued speaking. "The Carter legacy requires someone who can carry our name forward." Someone near the end of the table shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted. Adam's next words came slowly. "And unfortunately, Alexis cannot give this family that heir." The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. For a moment, the room remained silent. No one spoke. Alexis felt the baby move faintly inside her. Her daughter. She kept her hand gently over her stomach. Adam continued calmly. "The doctors say we're expecting a girl." Several relatives looked down at their plates. Margaret remained perfectly still. Adam turned slightly toward Alexis. "Tradition matters," he said. His tone was not angry. That was what made the moment colder. A daughter does not carry the Carter name. The silence in the room deepened. Alexis did not speak. She simply listened. Adam straightened his posture. "For the sake of my family," he said, "I've decided that Alexis and I should separate." The words stunned the room. Someone dropped a fork. A chair shifted slightly, but still no one openly objected. Adam's voice remained calm. "She will need to leave the house." Alexis slowly lifted her eyes and looked at him. There was no anger in her expression, only quiet understanding. Because the truth was something Alexis had already sensed coming. Margaret finally spoke. Her voice was controlled but firm. "Adam," she said, "perhaps this discussion could wait." But Adam shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "It's better that everyone understands the situation clearly." Margaret did not interrupt again. Some relatives looked shocked. Others simply avoided eye contact. Adam picked up his glass again. "I wish Alexis well," he said, "but my responsibility is to the Carter family." Then he sat down. The room remained silent. Alexis stayed seated for several seconds. Then she slowly pushed her chair back. The soft scraping sound of wood against the floor echoed through the dining room. All eyes followed her movement. Alexis stood. She placed one hand over her stomach. Her other hand rested lightly against the back of the chair. She did not cry. She did not argue. She did not accuse Adam of cruelty. Instead, she looked around the table once, at the relatives who had watched, at Margaret, whose expression remained unreadable, at Adam, who avoided her eyes now that his speech was finished. Alexis spoke only once. "I understand," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, controlled. Then she turned and walked toward the hallway. No one stopped her. Upstairs, Alexis moved slowly through the bedroom she had shared with Adam for 3 years. She opened the closet, selected a small suitcase, packed only what she needed. A few pieces of clothing, personal documents, her laptop, and finally, from the bedside drawer, her black notebook. She placed it carefully inside the bag. Downstairs, the dinner had resumed in uneasy silence. When Alexis returned with the suitcase, several relatives looked uncomfortable. One aunt seemed ready to say something, but hesitated. Margaret stood near the dining room entrance. For a moment, it looked as though she might intervene. But she did not. Adam remained seated. Alexis stopped briefly near the door. Then she spoke again, not loudly, just enough for the room to hear. "I hope the family gets everything it wants." No sarcasm, no anger, just a statement. Then she opened the front door. The warm Texas night waited outside. Alexis stepped onto the porch. The door closed quietly behind her. Inside the house, the Carter family dinner continued. Outside, Alexis walked down the driveway alone. The street was quiet. A few porch lights glowed in neighboring houses. Alexis placed her suitcase in the back seat of her car. Before starting the engine, she rested both hands on the steering wheel. Her daughter moved again inside her. Alexis took a slow breath. Then she reached into her bag and removed the black notebook. Under the porch light across the street, she wrote one final sentence. Adam Carter. She cannot give this family an heir. The ink dried quickly. Alexis closed the notebook, and without another word, she drove away from the Carter house. Inside that house, Adam Carter believed he had just removed a problem from his life. What he did not know was that somewhere far away, a completely different story had already begun, searching for Alexis Turner. A story worth $500 million. The small apartment Alexis rented the next morning was nothing like the Carter house. It sat above a quiet laundromat on the edge of downtown Houston. The building was old, the hallway narrow, and the walls thin enough that the sound of washing machines hummed faintly through the floor. But the apartment had two things Alexis needed: privacy and quiet. The landlord had barely asked questions. Alexis had paid the first month in advance, signed the paperwork, and moved in with only one suitcase and her laptop bag. Inside the apartment, the furniture was simple: a small bed near the window, a narrow table that served as both desk and dining space, a chair with slightly uneven legs. To most people, the room might have looked temporary. To Alexis, it looked peaceful. For the first time in months, there was no pressure in the air, no expectation hovering over every conversation, no quiet evaluation of her worth. She placed her suitcase beside the bed and sat down slowly. The baby shifted inside her again, a soft reminder that she was not alone. Alexis rested her hand gently over her stomach. "We'll be fine," she murmured. Her voice was calm, almost thoughtful. Then she stood up and unpacked. Clothes went into the small closet. Her laptop went onto the table. The black notebook returned to its familiar place, beside it. Within an hour, the apartment looked organized. Alexis had always believed that order helped the mind stay clear. After finishing, she made herself a cup of tea, using the small electric kettle the landlord had left in the kitchen corner. Steam rose slowly from the mug as she sat at the table. Outside the window, the street moved quietly. Cars passing, people walking their dogs, someone laughing in the distance. For the first time since leaving the Carter house, Alexis allowed herself to think about what had happened. Adam had not shouted. He had not insulted her with anger. Instead, he had done something colder. He had dismissed her, in front of witnesses. Alexis did not replay the scene with resentment. She simply examined it the way she examined numbers, fact by fact. Adam believed a daughter had no place in his legacy. Margaret had supported that belief, and the Carter family had remained silent. Alexis sipped her tea slowly. Then she opened her laptop. Her email inbox contained several routine messages from work, a notice about payroll updates, a reminder from her doctor's office about her next appointment, and one email she did not recognize. The subject line read, "Urgent estate notification. Alexis Turner." Alexis paused. The sender was listed as Reed and Lawson Estate Attorneys, New York. She frowned slightly. The name did not sound familiar. For a moment, Alexis assumed it was spam, but something about the formal wording made her curious. She clicked the email. The message opened immediately. "Dear Ms. Turner, our firm represents the estate of Mr. Charles Whitmore. Following his passing last week, our office has been instructed to locate and contact his sole surviving heir. According to our records, that heir is you." Alexis stared at the screen. The name Whitmore echoed faintly in her memory, but the connection felt distant. The email continued. "Mr. Whitmore was your maternal grandfather. His estate includes controlling ownership of Whitmore Holdings along with several financial trusts and properties. Current estimated value of the estate exceeds $500 million. For a moment, the room seemed unusually quiet. Alexis read the line again. $500 million. The number looked unreal, like a typing error or an exaggeration. Her first instinct was disbelief. She scrolled further down. "Our firm has been attempting to contact you for several days. Please respond as soon as possible so we may begin the legal verification process. Respectfully, Nathan Reed, Senior Partner, Reed and Lawson Estate Attorneys." Below the message sat a phone number and the firm's Manhattan address. Alexis leaned back slightly in her chair. The name Charles Whitmore surfaced slowly in her mind. Her mother had mentioned him only once many years ago. It had been during a quiet evening conversation when Alexis was still in college. Her mother had said something simple. "My father and I stopped speaking a long time ago." Alexis had never asked for details. Her mother had not volunteered them, and eventually the subject faded into silence. Alexis looked back at the email. If this message was real, it meant something extraordinary had happened. But Alexis had always believed that extraordinary claims required careful verification. She opened a new browser window and searched for Whitmore Holdings. The results appeared instantly. Financial news articles, business profiles, investment reports. Whitmore Holdings was not a small company. It was a major investment firm headquartered in New York City. The founder listed on the company history page was Charles Whitmore. Alexis read the information carefully. Real estate portfolios, technology investments, private equity holdings. The numbers were staggering. The estimated corporate assets alone reached several $100 million. Alexis sat quietly for a long time. Not shocked, not excited, just thoughtful. Because money in Alexis's mind was simply another form of information. It represented power, opportunity, responsibility. But it did not change facts. The most important fact remained simple. The Carter family had thrown her out of their home less than 24 hours earlier. Alexis closed the browser window and looked again at the email from Nathan Reed. The message waited patiently on the screen. $500 million. If it was true, the timing felt almost impossible. The contrast between yesterday and today was almost surreal. Yesterday, she had been publicly dismissed for failing to produce a son. Today, a law firm claimed she was the heir to one of the largest private estates in New York. Alexis placed her hand gently over her stomach again. Her daughter shifted slightly. For the first time since reading the email, Alexis allowed herself a small, quiet smile. Not because of the money, but because life had a strange sense of balance. She reached for her phone, dialed the number listed at the bottom of the email. The call connected after 2 rings. Reed and Lawson, a receptionist, answered. "Good afternoon," Alexis said calmly. "My name is Alexis Turner." There was a brief pause. Then the receptionist's voice changed slightly. "One moment, please." The line clicked. Several seconds passed. Then a man's voice came through the phone. "Ms. Turner," he said, "this is Nathan Reed." His tone carried a hint of relief. "We've been trying to reach you." Alexis looked around the small apartment once, the quiet room, the modest furniture, the single suitcase beside the bed. "I believe you mentioned an estate matter," she said calmly. "Yes," Nathan Reed replied. "It's quite significant." Alexis leaned back in her chair. "I assumed it might be." On the other end of the line, the lawyer spoke carefully. "Ms. Turner, you are the sole heir to the Whitmore estate." Alexis did not interrupt. Nathan Reed continued. "And the estate's current valuation is slightly over $500 million. Outside the apartment window, the city continued moving as usual. Cars passed, people walked. The world remained unchanged. Inside the small apartment, Alexis Turner quietly listened as a completely different future began unfolding. The phone call with Nathan Reed lasted nearly 40 minutes. Throughout the conversation, Alexis Turner spoke calmly, asking precise questions, the way she would review a financial statement, carefully line by line, verifying details before accepting conclusions. Nathan Reed seemed almost relieved by her composure. Many people, he explained, reacted with disbelief when hearing about sudden inheritances. Others reacted with excitement. A few reacted with suspicion. Alexis reacted with structure. "Let's start with the basics," she said quietly. "You mentioned Charles Whitmore was my maternal grandfather." "Yes," Nathan Reed confirmed. "And he passed away last week." "Correct. What proof do you have that I'm listed as the heir?" There was a brief pause on the line, followed by the faint sound of papers shifting. "Your name appears in Mr. Whitmore's updated will signed 6 years ago," Nathan Reed explained. "We also have documentation confirming your mother, Eleanor Whitmore Turner, was his only child." Alexis felt a small tightening in her chest at hearing her mother's full name. Her mother had rarely spoken about her family, but the name Whitmore had never completely disappeared from Alexis's memory. "Why wasn't I contacted earlier?" Alexis asked. Nathan Reed answered carefully. "Your grandfather and your mother had not spoken for many years. After her passing, our firm had difficulty locating you. Mr. Whitmore chose to update his will once we confirmed your identity." Alexis processed that quietly. Her mother had died 3 years earlier after a brief illness. At the time, Alexis had believed she had no remaining extended family. Now it appeared that assumption had been wrong. "What exactly does this estate include?" Alexis asked. Nathan Reed took a breath. "Whitmore Holdings is a private investment company founded by your grandfather. The firm manages multiple portfolios, commercial real estate technology investments, and several private equity funds." He paused briefly. "The estate also includes personal trusts, property holdings, and controlling shares in Whitmore Holdings." Alexis leaned back slightly in her chair. "And the estimated value? $512 million based on current market valuations." The number sounded almost abstract, but Alexis understood financial structures well enough to recognize what it meant. She did not celebrate. She did not gasp. Instead, she asked another question. "What happens next?" Nathan Reed seemed prepared for that. "The next step is verification," he said. "We'll need to confirm identity, conduct a DNA confirmation to legally establish lineage, and complete the estate transfer process." "How long does that take?" "Several weeks, possibly a few months depending on documentation." Alexis nodded to herself. "And you need me to come to New York?" "Yes," Nathan Reed said. "At least once, preferably within the next week." Alexis glanced around the small apartment. The quiet room, the modest table, the soft hum of washing machines downstairs. Just 24 hours earlier, she had been asked to leave the Carter house because she could not give the family a son. Now a Manhattan law firm was inviting her to claim a $500 million estate. Life rarely followed simple logic. but Alexis believed in dealing with facts as they appeared. "I can be in New York within 3 days," she said. Nathan Reed sounded relieved. "That would be excellent." After exchanging contact information and travel details, the call ended. Alexis placed her phone down slowly. The room returned to silence. For several minutes she simply sat there. Not overwhelmed, not emotional, just thinking. Her hand rested lightly over her stomach again. Her daughter moved gently. "You're having an interesting week," Alexis murmured softly. The baby shifted again as if responding. Alexis stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the Houston afternoon had brightened. The street looked ordinary. People walking, cars moving. Nothing in the outside world suggested anything had changed. But Alexis knew something had. Her life had quietly turned in a completely different direction. Still, she approached the situation the way she approached everything else, one step at a time. She opened her laptop again and searched for flights to New York. A morning flight 2 days later had available seats. She booked it without hesitation. Then she returned to her email and responded to Nathan Reed's message with a short confirmation. After closing the laptop, Alexis opened the black notebook. For months, the notebook had been filled with records of conversations inside the Carter family. Sentences that reflected pressure, expectations, judgments. Now Alexis turned to a blank page. She wrote, "Nathan Reed, Whitmore Estate, $512 million, verification process." She paused, then added another note, "Travel to New York, Tuesday." Alexis closed the notebook slowly. For the first time since leaving the Carter house, she felt something different. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just clarity. Her life was no longer connected to the expectations of the Carter family. Whatever happened next would belong to her. Meanwhile, across Houston, Adam Carter had no idea any of this was happening. Inside his office at Carter Development, Adam sat at his desk reviewing a stack of financial reports. The numbers in front of him were less comforting than they once had been. Construction costs had risen. 2 investors had withdrawn from a new development project, and the bank financing the project had begun requesting additional documentation. Adam rubbed his temple and leaned back in his chair. Running a real estate company required constant negotiation. Loans, investments, deadlines. Sometimes he thought it felt like balancing on a narrow ledge. Still, Adam believed he could handle it. He always had. His assistant knocked on the office door. "Adam, the bank called again," she said. "What do they want now?" "They're asking about the revised payment schedule." Adam frowned slightly. "I'll call them back." The assistant nodded and left. Adam leaned forward and stared at the financial projections on his desk. He had built Carter Development from almost nothing. He refused to let it fail, and he certainly refused to let anyone think he had made mistakes. The memory of the family dinner 2 nights earlier briefly crossed his mind. Alexis leaving the house, the relatives watching, Margaret standing silently in the doorway. Adam pushed the memory aside. What had been done was necessary. Legacy required decisions, and Alexis had not been able to provide what the Carter family needed. He returned his attention to the documents, numbers, loans, deadlines. What Adam Carter did not realize was that somewhere in New York, a financial empire had just identified its next owner, and within that empire existed investment funds large enough to reshape entire companies like Carter Development. But for now, those 2 worlds remained separate. Alexis Turner quietly prepared for a flight to New York. Adam Carter quietly fought to stabilize his struggling business. Neither of them yet understood how quickly their paths were about to cross again. And when they did, the balance of power between them would be very different from the night Alexis had walked out of the Carter house. 3 days later, Alexis Turner stepped out of a taxi onto a quiet street in Manhattan. The building in front of her rose nearly 30 stories, into the gray morning sky. Its glass exterior reflected the surrounding towers like a mirror of steel and light. Above the entrance, discreet silver lettering read, "Reed and Lawson, Estate Attorneys. Alexis paid." The driver stepped onto the sidewalk and paused for a moment. The air in New York felt different from Houston, cooler, faster, sharper. People moved quickly along the street, their conversations blending with the distant hum of traffic. Alexis placed one hand lightly over her stomach. Her daughter shifted gently, as if aware of the unfamiliar place. "We're just here for paperwork," Alexis murmured quietly. Then she walked inside. The lobby of the building was quiet and immaculate. Marble floors reflected the soft lighting overhead. A receptionist sat behind a long desk near the elevators. "Good morning," Alexis said calmly. The receptionist looked up. "Yes, my name is Alexis Turner. I have a meeting with Nathan Reed." The woman's expression changed instantly. "Oh, of course. Mr. Reed is expecting you." She pressed a button on the desk phone. "Ms. Turner has arrived." A moment later, she stood and gestured toward the elevators. 31st floor. Alexis thanked her and stepped inside the elevator. As the doors closed, she watched the floor numbers climb. 8, 9, 10, 11. When the elevator opened, a quiet reception area waited beyond the doors. A man in his early 50s stood near the window, reviewing a tablet. He looked up as Alexis entered. "Ms. Turner?" he asked. "Yes." The man walked forward with a polite smile. "Nathan Reed." He shook her hand firmly. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice." Alexis nodded. "I prefer clarity when important things appear unexpectedly." Nathan Reed chuckled softly. "I suspected that from our phone call." He led her through a hallway lined with framed financial articles and photographs of city skylines. They entered a spacious conference room overlooking Manhattan. Glass walls framed the view of the city stretching in every direction. Nathan Reed gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." Alexis placed her bag beside the chair and sat down carefully. Nathan Reed opened a thick leather folder and placed several documents on the table. "I imagine this situation feels unusual," he said. "Unexpected," Alexis replied. "That's understandable." He slid the first document toward her. "This is a copy of Charles Whitmore's final will." Alexis examined the pages quietly. The legal language was precise, detailed. Her name appeared clearly in the document. Alexis Eleanor Turner, sole heir. Nathan Reed continued explaining. "Your grandfather revised his will 6 years ago after learning your mother had passed away." Alexis paused at that. "My mother never mentioned reconnecting with him." Nathan Reed nodded. "She didn't. According to his notes, Mr. Whitmore attempted contact several times but respected her decision not to respond." Alexis turned another page. The document included asset summaries, investment portfolios, property records. "This is Whitmore Holdings?" she asked. "Yes." Nathan Reed pulled another folder forward. Inside were printed financial reports. Alexis studied the numbers with the careful attention of someone trained in accounting. Commercial real estate portfolios across multiple states, technology startup investments, private equity stakes. The scale of the holdings was enormous. Nathan Reed watched her reaction, or rather, the lack of reaction. "You're taking this remarkably calmly," he observed. Alexis closed the folder. "Money doesn't become real until it's verified," she said. Nathan Reed smiled slightly. "That's a sensible philosophy." He slid another document across the table. "This is the first step." Alexis glanced at it. "A formal verification agreement. DNA, testing authorization, estate transfer procedures." "What happens after verification?" Alexis asked. Nathan Reed folded his hands. "Once we legally confirm you as the heir, ownership of Whitmore Holdings transfers into your control." Control meaning You become majority owner and chair of the company's trust structure. Alexis leaned back slightly. So decisions regarding investments would ultimately require my approval. Correct. Nathan Reed paused. Though you would have an experienced management team assisting you. Alexis nodded slowly. She turned toward the window and looked at the skyline. Hundreds of buildings stretched across Manhattan, each one representing businesses, investments, decisions made by people with resources and influence. If Nathan Reed was correct, she would soon have control over a company operating at that level. It was a remarkable thought. But Alexis approached it the same way she approached everything else, with patience. What about liabilities, she asked. Nathan Reed looked pleased by the question. Very minimal. Whitmore Holdings has operated conservatively for decades. The company maintains strong liquidity. He opened another document. We've also prepared summaries of current investments. Alexis scanned the list. Technology companies, infrastructure funds, commercial development loans. One line caught her attention. A section labeled Commercial Real Estate Debt Holdings. Nathan Reed noticed her focus. That division manages investment loans to development companies. Alexis nodded. Her eyes moved across the list of borrowers. Dozens of company names appeared. She did not recognize most of them, but the concept was familiar. Large investment firms often purchased corporate debt. It allowed them to influence companies without directly operating them. Alexis closed the folder. What do you need from me today? She asked. Nathan Reed handed her a pen. Just signatures authorizing the verification process. Alexis signed each document carefully. When she finished, Nathan Reed collected the pages and placed them back into the folder. Excellent, he said. The DNA confirmation should be completed within 10 days, and after that, the estate transfer begins. Alexis nodded. The meeting ended soon after. Nathan Reed walked her back toward the elevators. I suspect your life will become more complicated soon, he said. Alexis gave a faint smile. It already has. They shook hands once more. As Alexis stepped into the elevator, she felt the baby move again. Her daughter, the child the Carter family had rejected. The child Adam Carter had dismissed as unimportant. Alexis rested her hand gently against her stomach. The elevator doors closed. Downstairs, Manhattan traffic moved in constant motion. Across the country in Houston, Adam Carter sat inside his office, dealing with a different set of numbers. A new email had arrived from his bank that morning. Subject line loan review. Carter Development. Adam opened it with mild irritation. The message informed him that the bank had sold part of Carter Development's outstanding debt to a private investment group. That was not unusual in commercial finance. Banks sold debt all the time. Still, Adam frowned slightly. The email listed the new debt holder, Whitmore Holdings Investment Group. Adam read the name once, then again. He had heard of Whitmore Holdings before, a powerful investment firm based in New York. Adam leaned back in his chair. If Whitmore Holdings had purchased part of his company's debt, it meant they would now be reviewing Carter Development's financial structure, which meant scrutiny, which meant pressure. Adam closed the email with a sigh. For now, it was simply business. Nothing more. What he did not know was that the future owner of Whitmore Holdings had just signed the paperwork, confirming her claim to the entire company. And that owner was the same woman he had asked to leave his house 3 nights earlier. Alexis Turner. While Alexis Turner spent the following week moving quietly between legal meetings in New York, Adam Carter faced a very different kind of pressure back in Houston. At first, the email from the bank about the debt transfer had not seemed alarming. Banks sold loans frequently. It was a normal part of commercial finance. But by the 3rd day, Adam began to notice that the situation felt different. The tone of communication had changed. Previously, the bank had been patient, flexible, even friendly. Now the emails arriving in Adam's inbox were more formal, shorter, direct, requests for updated financial statements, clarification of construction timelines, copies of supplier contracts. Adam sat in his office, late one evening staring at the newest message. Subject line, Financial Documentations Quest. Carter Development. The sender listed was not the bank. It was someone named Whitmore Holdings. Investment Compliance Division. Adam leaned back in his chair. Whitmore Holdings. The name had appeared in the earlier notice as the company that purchased part of his loan, but Adam had not expected them to move so quickly. He opened the email. Dear Mr. Carter, following our acquisition of a portion of Carter Development's outstanding commercial debt, Whitmore Holdings is conducting a routine review of financial compliance. Please provide the following documentation within 5 business days. The list below included more than 20 items: cash flow statements, vendor agreements, internal accounting summaries, construction payment schedules. Adam frowned slightly. The request was thorough, almost aggressive. He called his financial manager, Derek. Have you seen this? Adam asked, forwarding the email. A few minutes later, Derek walked into the office holding a printed copy. Yeah, Derek said, sitting down. I was about to ask you about it. What do they want with all this detail? Derek shrugged. Investment firms like Whitmore sometimes review their borrowers carefully. Adam tapped the desk impatiently. This level of detail isn't normal. Derek hesitated before answering. Well, it can happen if they think something looks risky. Adam's expression hardened slightly. My company isn't risky. Derek did not respond immediately. The silence in the office stretched for a moment. Finally, Derek said carefully, We've had a few delayed payments on the North Side project. Adam waved a hand dismissively. That's temporary. Of course. Derek leaned forward. But Whitmore Holdings manages billions in investments. They're probably just protecting themselves. Adam exhaled slowly. He disliked the feeling of being evaluated, especially by outsiders. Still, the situation was manageable. Get them the documents, Adam said. Everything they asked for. Derek nodded. I'll start compiling it tonight. As Derek left the office, Adam turned back toward the window. The Houston skyline stretched across the evening horizon. He had built Carter Development from nothing. For 10 years he had navigated loans, construction delays, investor demands. He refused to let some distant investment firm intimidate him. Still, the name Whitmore Holdings remained in his thoughts. He opened his laptop and searched for the company. Articles appeared instantly. Whitmore Holdings expands commercial investment portfolio. Whitmore Holdings acquires multi-state development debt. Whitmore Holdings founder Charles Whitmore dies at 81. Adam skimmed through the articles quickly. The company had a reputation for cautious but powerful financial influence. They rarely involved themselves publicly, but when they did, their decisions could reshape entire companies. Adam closed the browser. It didn't matter. Carter Development would pass their review. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in New York, Alexis Turner sat in a quiet office, reviewing a very similar set of documents. Nathan Reed had arranged a second meeting. This time the conference room table held several organized folders. Verification is progressing smoothly, Nathan Reed said. The DNA confirmation already shows a match with Charles Whitmore's records. Alexis nodded. That was expected. Nathan Reed smiled faintly. Most heirs react with more emotion. Alexis folded her hands calmly. Emotion doesn't speed up legal processes. Nathan Reed chuckled softly. Fair enough. He slid one of the folders toward her. Today I'd like to review Whitmore Holdings' current investment positions. Alexis opened the folder. Inside were detailed summaries of the company's largest holdings: commercial real estate funds, energy infrastructure investments, technology startups. Alexis studied the documents carefully. Her accounting background allowed her to read the financial structures quickly. "Your grandfather maintained a conservative strategy," Nathan Reed explained. "Low-risk, steady growth." Alexis nodded. "That's clear." Nathan Reed flipped to another section. Recently, the company expanded its commercial development lending. Alexis turned the page. A list of companies receiving financing appeared. Loan amounts, project details, payment schedules. One name caught her attention immediately. Carter Development, Houston, Texas. Alexis paused. The words were familiar. She read the line carefully. Whitmore Holdings had purchased a portion of Carter Development's outstanding debt only days earlier. Nathan Reed noticed her expression. "Do you recognize the company?" he asked. Alexis remained calm. "Yes." Nathan Reed waited. "It belongs to my husband," Alexis said quietly. Nathan Reed blinked. "I see." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nathan Reed opened another document. "This acquisition was approved by the investment team shortly before your grandfather's death," he explained. Alexis scanned the financial summary. Carter Development had borrowed heavily to finance multiple projects. One of them, the Northside Commercial Complex, was already experiencing delays. "Is the loan secure?" Alexis asked. Nathan Reed hesitated. "It's borderline. What does that mean?" "The project must begin producing revenue soon. Otherwise, the company may struggle to meet repayment deadlines." Alexis closed the folder. Her face remained completely neutral. Nathan Reed studied her for a moment. "Would you like the investment team to withdraw from the loan?" he asked. Alexis shook her head slowly. "No." Nathan Reed seemed surprised. "You're certain?" "Yes." Alexis turned toward the window overlooking Manhattan. "I don't interfere with existing contracts," she said calmly. Nathan Reed nodded slowly. "That is a very disciplined approach." Alexis returned her attention to the documents. The situation carried an irony that was almost impossible to ignore. Adam Carter had forced her out of his home because she could not give him a son. And now the investment firm holding part of his company's debt was about to belong entirely to her. But Alexis did not smile. She did not feel triumphant, because the situation was not personal. Not yet. It was simply business, contracts, numbers, obligations. Still, one fact remained quietly powerful. Adam Carter had no idea who would soon control the company reviewing his financial stability, and Alexis Turner had not yet decided how involved she intended to become. For now, she simply turned another page in the financial report and continued reading. The following week, Whitmore Holdings completed one of the largest internal transactions in its recent portfolio. The purchase had been approved quietly, without press releases or public announcements. But within the world of corporate finance, the implications were significant. Whitmore Holdings had officially acquired the majority of Carter Development's outstanding commercial debt. In simple terms, the company that Adam Carter had spent a decade building now owed its largest financial obligation to Whitmore Holdings. Inside the Manhattan headquarters, the decision looked like a standard investment. Inside the Houston offices of Carter Development, however, the consequences began to appear almost immediately. Adam Carter received the formal notice on a Monday morning. The envelope arrived by courier. Thick, official, his assistant placed it carefully on his desk. "Legal delivery," she said. Adam frowned slightly. He opened the envelope and removed the documents inside. At the top of the first page, bold lettering read, "Whitmore Holdings, Debt Transfer Confirmation." Adam read the letter slowly. It confirmed that Whitmore Holdings had acquired the bank's position as the primary lender for Carter Development's Northside project. The total loan value exceeded $26 million, and the terms of review would now be handled by Whitmore Holdings' Financial Compliance Department. Adam exhaled slowly. He had expected this might happen. Still, seeing the numbers in writing made the situation feel heavier. His phone rang. It was Derek. "You got the notice?" Derek asked. "Yes. What do you think?" Adam leaned back in his chair. "It means we're dealing with a bigger player now." Derek hesitated. "That can be good or bad." Adam glanced again at the document. Whitmore Holdings was known for aggressive financial discipline. They rarely forgave missed deadlines. "I'll schedule a meeting with them," Adam said. "Better to show we're cooperating." Derek agreed. "Good idea." The call ended. Adam stood and walked toward the window of his office. Construction cranes dotted the Houston skyline. For years, Adam had imagined his company becoming part of that skyline permanently. A lasting mark, a legacy. But legacy required stability, and Whitmore Holdings now had the authority to examine every financial decision his company made. Meanwhile, nearly 2,000 miles away, Alexis Turner sat in the executive conference room of Whitmore Holdings for the first time. The verification process had moved quickly. DNA. Confirmation had already established her identity as Charles Whitmore's granddaughter. The legal transfer of estate control was now entering its final stage. Nathan Reed stood near the head of the table, addressing a small group of executives. "These are the senior members of the Whitmore investment team," he explained. Alexis nodded politely to each person as they introduced themselves. David Larson, Chief Financial Officer. Elena Morales, Head of Commercial Investments. Patrick Chen, Director of Strategic Finance. Each of them studied Alexis with professional curiosity. Not skepticism, but caution. After all, their company was about to pass into the control of someone they had never met before. Nathan Reed continued. "As you know, Ms. Turner will soon become the majority owner of Whitmore Holdings under the terms of Charles Whitmore's estate." David Larson leaned forward slightly. "We're pleased to meet you," he said. Alexis returned the polite tone. "I appreciate the introduction." Elena Morales opened a tablet in front of her. "We've prepared summaries of our current investments," she explained. "Of course," Alexis said. The meeting began. Over the next hour, the executives explained the company's major financial positions: infrastructure funds, technology ventures, commercial property portfolios. Alexis listened quietly. Occasionally, she asked questions, precise ones. How is liquidity distributed across the infrastructure fund? What percentage of commercial debt holdings are classified as moderate risk? What is the average repayment window for development loans? The executives answered carefully. Gradually, the tone of the meeting shifted. At first, they had been explaining the company to a potential heir. Now they were speaking with someone who clearly understood financial structures. Finally, Elena Morales opened a new file. "One investment we should mention specifically," she said. The screen displayed a familiar name. Carter Development, Houston Commercial Project. Alexis did not react visibly. Elena continued. "This loan was recently acquired from Gulf National Bank." Patrick Chen added it represents about $26 million in exposure. Alexis studied the numbers calmly. "What is the current repayment risk level?" Elena replied. "Moderate to high. Why construction delays on the North Side complex?" Alexis nodded. "What happens if repayment fails?" Patrick Chen answered. "The loan agreement allows Whitmore Holdings to assume control of the project assets." Alexis leaned slightly back in her chair. "And the timeline for repayment? 18 months remaining." The room grew quiet for a moment. None of the executives knew the connection between Alexis Turner and Adam Carter. To them, Carter Development was simply another investment. Nathan Reed glanced briefly toward Alexis. He knew, but he said nothing. Alexis closed the file. "For now, continue normal oversight," she said calmly. Elena looked slightly surprised. "You don't want to review the company more aggressively?" Alexis shook her head. "Not yet." Patrick Chen nodded. "That's reasonable." The meeting continued for another hour. By the end of it, Alexis had reviewed nearly every major financial sector of Whitmore Holdings. When the session ended, Nathan Reed walked with her into the hallway. "You handled that well," he said. Alexis gave a faint smile. Numbers behave predictably when people explain them honestly. Nathan Reed paused. "May I ask something?" "Of course. Does it bother you that your husband's company is connected to this investment?" Alexis considered the question for a moment. Then she answered simply, "I haven't decided if it bothers me." Nathan Reed nodded slowly. "That's fair." Across the country, Adam Carter finished reviewing the debt transfer documents and placed them back into the envelope. He had already decided on his next step, a formal meeting with Whitmore Holdings' investment team. If they wanted oversight, he would show them cooperation. If they wanted reassurance, he would demonstrate stability. Adam believed in solving problems directly. What he did not realize was that the ultimate authority behind Whitmore Holdings was no longer a distant board of investors. It was Alexis Turner, the same woman he had told to leave his house because she could not give him a son. But Alexis had not yet revealed her connection. For now, she allowed the financial structure to continue operating exactly as it had before. Quietly, predictably. And sometimes the most powerful position in a negotiation was the one no one else knew existed. By the time autumn began to approach Houston, Carter Development had entered the most critical phase of the North Side commercial project. The steel structure of the building now rose 6 stories above the construction site. Workers moved constantly between scaffolding and concrete floors. Trucks arrived before sunrise and left after sunset. From the outside, the project looked impressive. But inside Adam Carter's office, the numbers told a different story. Construction delays had pushed the budget beyond its original estimate. Material costs had increased. Several subcontractors had demanded revised payment schedules. The company could still complete the project, but only if cash flow remained steady. And cash flow depended on lenders. Whitmore Holdings now held the largest portion of Carter Development's debt. Adam had already scheduled a video conference with their investment compliance team. The meeting would take place that afternoon. Inside the Carter Development conference room, Adam sat at the long table with Derek and the company's legal advisor. The screen at the far end of the room flickered on. 3 faces appeared. Elena Morales, Patrick Chen, and another man Adam had not met before. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter," Elena said professionally. "Good afternoon," Adam replied. The meeting began with polite introductions. Elena spoke first. "As you know, Whitmore Holdings recently acquired the majority position in the financing of your Northside project." Adam nodded. "Yes, we received the documentation," Patrick Chen continued. "Our purpose today is simply to review the project timeline and ensure compliance with the loan agreement." Adam leaned forward. "We're happy to cooperate." Elena opened a digital file. "According to our records, construction completion is expected within 9 months. "That's correct," Adam said. Patrick Chen added, "However, we've noticed several payment delays involving subcontractors." Adam felt Derek shift slightly beside him. "They've all been addressed," Adam replied quickly. Patrick Chen remained calm. "Could you explain the delays?" Adam kept his tone steady. "Material suppliers increased prices unexpectedly. We adjusted payments while renegotiating contracts." Elena typed notes on her tablet. "And your revised cash flow projections." Derek slid a document across the table toward the camera. "We've updated our forecast. The project remains financially viable." Elena studied the numbers carefully. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the conference equipment. Finally, she nodded. "The projections appear reasonable." Adam allowed himself a small breath of relief. But Patrick Chen was not finished. "One additional matter," he said. He pulled up another document. Our internal audit identified several transfers between Carter Development and a secondary holding account. Adam stiffened slightly. That's normal operational movement. Patrick Chen's tone remained neutral. Some of the transfers lack clear documentation. Adam felt irritation rising. They were short-term liquidity adjustments. Patrick Chen replied calmly, "Our compliance policy requires full transparency." Adam forced himself to stay composed. "We'll provide the records." Elena closed the file. "That would be appreciated." The meeting ended shortly afterward. When the screen went dark, Adam leaned back in his chair. "That was unnecessary," he muttered. Derek looked uneasy. "They're just doing due diligence." Adam rubbed his temple. "I built this company. Now some investment firm wants to inspect every transaction." Derek didn't respond, but the truth was simple. Whitmore Holdings had the legal right to inspect everything. Meanwhile, in New York, Alexis Turner was reviewing the same financial reports Patrick Chen had just mentioned. She sat alone in her temporary office overlooking Manhattan. Stacks of documents covered the desk. Bank statements, contract summaries, audit reports. Alexis read them carefully, one page at a time. The more she reviewed, the clearer the financial pattern became. Carter Development was not collapsing, but it was stretched. Several payments had been delayed to manage liquidity. One particular series of transfers caught Alexis's attention. Money had moved from the company's operating account to a secondary holding account controlled directly by Adam Carter, then back again several weeks later. The amounts were not enormous, but the timing suggested something important. Alexis made a note. Then she opened another document. Email correspondence between Carter Development and several subcontractors. One message from a construction supplier stood out. Subject payment reminder. Outstanding invoice. The message included a short line, as discussed, further delays may affect delivery schedule. Alexis leaned back slightly. Construction projects often involved complicated payment timing, but repeated delays could create risk. She continued reading. Another file appeared. Internal accounting summaries from Carter Development. The numbers were accurate enough, but Alexis noticed something else. The formatting was inconsistent. Certain entries lacked detailed explanations. It was not fraud, but it was careless. Alexis closed the folder and looked out the window. Below her, Manhattan traffic moved through the streets like a constant river of motion. The situation unfolding in Houston was predictable. Adam Carter had built a company quickly, but growth often came faster than structure, and structure was what lenders demanded. Nathan Reed entered the office quietly. "You've been reviewing the Carter Development files," he observed. "Yes." He sat in the chair across from her. "What's your impression?" Alexis considered the question. "The company is not dishonest." Nathan Reed waited. "But it's unstable," she added. "That aligns with our investment team's assessment." Nathan Reed leaned back. "If the project fails, Whitmore Holdings could legally assume control of the property." Alexis nodded slowly. "That's how the contract works." Nathan Reed studied her expression. "You're very calm about all of this." Alexis folded her hands. "Business problems don't become clearer when emotions are involved." Nathan Reed smiled slightly. "That's true." He stood to leave, but before reaching the door, he paused. "There's one more thing," he said. "Adam Carter requested an in-person meeting with Whitmore Holdings leadership next month." Alexis looked up. "Why he wants to reassure the investors." Alexis thought for a moment. "Will you attend?" Nathan Reed asked. She didn't answer immediately. Outside the window, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. Finally, Alexis spoke. "Yes." Nathan Reed raised an eyebrow slightly. "Are you planning to introduce yourself?" Alexis closed the Carter Development file and placed it neatly on the desk. "Not yet." Nathan Reed nodded. Understood. When he left the office, Alexis rested her hand gently over her stomach again. Her daughter shifted softly. Adam Carter believed he was preparing to meet a group of investors. What he did not know was that the most important person in that meeting would be someone he had already dismissed. And the records Alexis Turner had quietly been collecting, bank statements, emails, transaction histories, would soon speak far louder than any argument. The official notice arrived at Carter Development on a quiet Tuesday morning. Unlike the previous letters Adam Carter had received, this one carried a different tone. The envelope bore the logo of Whitmore Holdings in sharp silver lettering. Inside was a formal document titled Notice of Financial Review and Compliance Hearing. Adam read the first paragraph twice. Whitmore Holdings had scheduled an in-person compliance review regarding Carter Development's North Side project. The meeting would take place in New York at the company's headquarters. Attendance was mandatory. Adam placed the letter on his desk and leaned back in his chair. Across the room, Derek looked up from his laptop. "That doesn't look good," he said cautiously. Adam exhaled through his nose. "It's a review, that's all." Derek didn't respond immediately. Adam picked up the document again and read further. Whitmore Holdings intended to examine project finances, construction delays, and internal fund transfers. If the company failed to demonstrate compliance with loan terms, further action could be taken. Adam rubbed his temple. The tone felt less like a routine review and more like a legal checkpoint. Still, he believed the situation could be managed. "We'll go to New York," Adam said. Derek nodded. "When next week?" Derek hesitated. "You think they're worried about the project?" Adam shrugged. "Investors worry about everything." But privately, Adam knew something else was happening. Whitmore Holdings had begun looking deeper into Carter Development's internal finances. And when large investment firms began asking detailed questions, it usually meant they were preparing for a decision. Meanwhile, in New York, Alexis Turner sat in the same conference room where the meeting would soon take place. Nathan Reed stood beside a large digital screen displaying financial summaries. "The compliance hearing is standard procedure," he explained. Alexis nodded. "And Carter Development requested it." "Yes," Nathan said. "They want to reassure the investors." Alexis studied the screen. It displayed Carter Development's loan timeline, payment history, construction milestones, the same information she had already reviewed several times. "What will happen during the meeting?" Alexis asked. Nathan Reed folded his arms. "The investment team will question Mr. Carter about the project delays and financial transfers. And if his answers are unsatisfactory," Nathan hesitated, "Whitmore Holdings can accelerate the loan terms or initiate asset control proceedings." Alexis closed the folder on the table. "And you expect that outcome?" Nathan Reed gave a careful response. "It depends on what his records show." Alexis already knew what those records showed. Delayed payments, unstructured financial movement, emails from subcontractors, warning about missed deadlines. Nothing illegal, but enough instability to concern a lender managing hundreds of millions in investments. "Will you attend the meeting?" Nathan asked. "Yes." Nathan looked at her thoughtfully. "And will you reveal your position?" Alexis glanced toward the glass wall overlooking Manhattan. Below them, the city moved with its usual relentless rhythm. "Not immediately," she said. Nathan nodded slowly. "You prefer to observe first?" "Yes." Because Alexis had learned something during her years of quiet observation. People often revealed more about themselves when they believed they were speaking to strangers. The following week, Adam Carter boarded a flight to New York. The trip felt unusually heavy. He had attended dozens of business meetings in his career. But this one felt different. Whitmore Holdings controlled too much of his company's financial structure. When his plane landed at LaGuardia Airport, Adam took a taxi directly to Manhattan. The city's towering skyline appeared through the taxi window as they crossed the bridge. Adam checked his watch. The meeting would begin in 40 minutes. When the taxi stopped in front of the Whitmore Holdings building, Adam stepped out and looked up. The building's glass exterior reflected the clouds moving slowly across the sky. Inside, the lobby felt calm and quiet. Professional. A receptionist greeted him. "Mr. Carter." "Yes, they're expecting you on the 31st floor." Adam nodded and walked toward the elevators. As the elevator climbed, he reviewed his mental preparation. Explain the construction delays, clarify the payment adjustments, reassure the investors that Carter Development remained stable. The elevator doors opened. A woman in a dark suit greeted him near the conference room. "Mr. Carter," she said politely. "I'm Elena Morales." Adam recognized the name from the earlier video conference. They shook hands. "Good to see you again," Adam said. Elena gestured toward the conference room. "Please come in." Inside the room, several people were already seated around the long table. Patrick Chen, 2 financial analysts, and Nathan Reed. Adam nodded to each of them as he took a seat. The room was bright with glass walls overlooking Manhattan's skyline, but the atmosphere inside felt serious. Elena opened the meeting. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter." Adam nodded. "Of course." Patrick Chen pulled up a digital report. "We've reviewed the financial documents you submitted last week." Adam folded his hands calmly. "I'm happy to clarify anything." Patrick displayed a chart on the screen. "This shows the Northside project's current financial status." Adam recognized the numbers immediately. Construction costs, revenue projections, loan balances. Patrick pointed to a highlighted section. Several payments to subcontractors were delayed beyond the original contract terms. Adam leaned forward slightly. "That was due to material price increases." Patrick nodded. "And the internal transfers." Adam hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Temporary liquidity adjustments." Patrick typed something into the tablet. The analysts exchanged quiet glances. Nathan Reed remained silent at the far end of the table. Elena spoke again. "We also reviewed your company's bank records." Adam felt a subtle tension in his chest. "They're accurate," he said. Patrick turned to the next page. "Some transfers appear to move funds between accounts controlled personally by you." Adam kept his voice steady. "That was part of a short-term financing arrangement." Patrick raised an eyebrow. "There is limited documentation for those transfers." Adam felt the room growing quieter. They were temporary. Elena leaned forward slightly. "We're simply seeking clarity." Adam nodded. "You'll have it." The meeting continued for nearly an hour. Question after question, document after document. Adam answered carefully, but gradually he began to realize something. The Whitmore team already knew most of the answers. They were not discovering information. They were confirming it. Finally, Patrick closed his tablet. "Thank you for explaining the situation, Mr. Carter." Adam nodded. "So what happens now?" Elena glanced toward Nathan Reed. Then she looked back at Adam. "We'll review today's discussion with senior leadership." Adam stood. "I'd appreciate a timely decision." Elena gave a polite smile. "Of course." As Adam prepared to leave the room, the glass door at the far end opened quietly. A woman stepped inside. Adam did not notice her immediately. But Nathan Reed stood. "Ms. Turner," he said respectfully. Adam turned, and for the first time since the night he had asked her to leave his house, Adam Carter saw Alexis Turner again. She stood calmly near the entrance of the conference room. One hand rested lightly against the table. Her posture was relaxed, her expression unreadable. Adam stared at her confusion, flickering across his face. because he could not yet understand why his pregnant wife, whom he had publicly dismissed only weeks earlier, was standing inside the headquarters of the investment firm reviewing his company's future. And no one in the room looked surprised to see her. For several seconds after Alexis Turner entered the conference room, no one spoke. The silence felt heavier than any question that had been asked during the previous hour. Adam Carter remained standing near his chair, his briefcase still in his hand. His mind struggled to connect the scene in front of him with what he believed he understood about the world. Alexis, inside Whitmore Holdings, inside the same room where executives had just reviewed his company's financial stability. His first thought was simple confusion. Alexis, he said slowly. Her name sounded unfamiliar in that room. Alexis did not rush to answer. She stepped further inside her posture. Calm, her movements unhurried. The executives around the table did not appear surprised by her arrival. That detail struck Adam immediately. Elena Morales closed her tablet. Patrick Chen leaned back in his chair. Nathan Reed remained standing. None of them reacted as though a stranger had entered the room. Instead, they watched Alexis with quiet expectation. Adam felt a faint tightening in his chest. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His voice carried a note of irritation mixed with disbelief. Alexis stopped beside the conference table. For a moment, she simply looked at him. The same man who had asked her to leave his house only weeks earlier. The same man who had declared in front of his entire family that she had no place in his future because she could not give him a son. Her expression did not show anger or triumph, only calm. Nathan Reed finally spoke. "Mr. Carter," he said politely, "allow me to introduce you properly." Adam turned toward him. Nathan gestured toward Alexis. "This is Ms. Alexis Turner." Adam frowned. "I know who she is." Nathan Reed's voice remained steady. "Yes, but you may not know her current role." Adam felt the room shift around him. What role? Nathan paused briefly before answering. "Ms. Turner is the sole heir to the Whitmore estate." Adam blinked. The sentence did not immediately make sense. "What does that mean?" he asked. Patrick Chen answered this time. "It means Ms. Turner will soon assume majority ownership of Whitmore Holdings." The words landed slowly, like stones dropped into deep water. Adam's mind raced through the implications. Whitmore Holdings, the investment firm reviewing his company, the lender controlling his largest project, the company capable of determining whether Carter Development survived the next year. Adam looked back at Alexis. "You're saying," he began, but the sentence did not finish. Alexis spoke for the first time since entering the room. "My grandfather was Charles Whitmore." Her voice was calm, measured. Adam stared at her. The name was familiar. He had read it during his research after receiving the loan transfer notice. Charles Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Holdings, a man whose investments shaped entire industries. Adam shook his head slightly. "That's not possible." Alexis did not argue. Nathan Reed opened a folder and placed a document on the table. "DNA verification has confirmed Ms. Turner's lineage," he said. "Legal transfer of the estate is already in process," Patrick Chen added quietly. "Within weeks, Ms. Turner will become the controlling owner of Whitmore Holdings." Adam felt the room tilt slightly. For years he had believed he understood power. Business loans, real estate, investors. But the scale of Whitmore Holdings was entirely different, and Alexis, his wife, the woman he had dismissed in front of his family, was about to control it. Adam turned back toward her. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Alexis considered the question. "You never asked." Adam felt a flicker of frustration. "You knew about this, I found out the day after I left the house." Adam's jaw tightened. You could have said something. Alexis rested her hand lightly on the back of a chair. Her daughter moved gently beneath her hand. Would it have changed what you said that night, she asked. The question settled into the room, like quiet gravity. Adam did not answer, because the truth was obvious. No, it would not have changed anything. That night he had not been evaluating Alexis's financial worth. He had been evaluating her ability to produce a son. Patrick Chen cleared his throat softly. We should return to the compliance review. The sentence sounded almost awkward now, because the power dynamic in the room had changed completely. Adam slowly sat down again. For the first time during the meeting, he looked uncertain. Nathan Reed spoke again. Mr. Carter, the compliance process will continue exactly as outlined. Adam nodded slowly. But now you understand who ultimately oversees Whitmore Holdings. Adam looked once more at Alexis, the woman he had believed powerless. The woman he had expected to disappear quietly after leaving his house. You're reviewing my company, he said. Alexis answered calmly. No. Adam frowned. Whitmore Holdings is reviewing it. She paused briefly. But I will see the results. Adam exhaled slowly. The implications were unavoidable. If Carter Development failed its compliance review, Whitmore Holdings could accelerate the loan or seize project assets. And the person controlling that decision would soon be Alexis Turner. The same woman he had told to leave his house. Adam ran a hand across his face. This is unbelievable, he muttered. Alexis did not respond to that, because disbelief did not change facts. Nathan Reed gathered the documents on the table. We will conclude today's meeting here, he said. Patrick Chen nodded. Final review decisions will be communicated within 2 weeks. Adam stood slowly. For the first time since entering the room, he did not look confident. Instead, he looked uncertain. He turned toward Alexis. For a moment it seemed like he might say something personal, an apology, an explanation. But the words never came, because in that room, personal conversations no longer mattered. Only contracts, loans, decisions. Adam finally picked up his briefcase. I'll wait for your decision, he said quietly. Elena Morales nodded. Thank you for attending. Adam walked toward the door. When he reached it, he paused. For a brief moment, he looked back at Alexis. But she was already reviewing the documents Nathan Reed had placed in front of her. Focused, calm, professional. Adam Carter left the room without another word. After the door closed, Patrick Chen leaned back in his chair. That was unexpected, he said. Nathan Reed smiled slightly. Life tends to be. Alexis continued reading the financial summary on the table. The numbers had not changed. Carter Development remained financially unstable. Whether the company survived would depend on decisions made over the next few weeks. But Alexis Turner had never believed in making decisions based on emotion. She believed in evidence, and the evidence was still being reviewed. After Adam Carter left the conference room at Whitmore Holdings, the atmosphere inside the building shifted back to its usual, quiet professionalism. Business continued. Analysts reviewed spreadsheets. Investment managers discussed portfolios. But in the executive offices on the 31st floor, the Carter Development file remained open on Alexis Turner's desk. The numbers had not changed since the meeting. Construction delays, cash flow adjustments, incomplete documentation for several financial transfers. None of it was catastrophic, but none of it was strong either. Whitmore Holdings had built its reputation on disciplined investment decisions. Projects that showed instability were monitored carefully, sometimes supported, sometimes taken over. Alexis sat quietly reviewing the file again. Across the desk, Nathan Reed watched her thoughtfully. You understand, he said gently, that the investment committee will follow standard procedure. Alexis nodded. I expect them to. Nathan folded his hands. The committee's recommendation will likely be to tighten the loan terms. Alexis closed the folder. That would be reasonable. Nathan hesitated before asking the question that had been lingering since the meeting. Do you intend to influence the decision? Alexis leaned back slightly in her chair. Outside the window, Manhattan moved in steady motion below. Cars flowed through the avenues. People crossed intersections. The world rarely paused for individual stories. I won't interfere with the committee, Alexis said calmly. Nathan studied her expression. Even though the company belongs to your husband, Alexis corrected him quietly. Belonged. Nathan nodded slowly. The distinction mattered. Alexis and Adam were still legally married, but their lives had already moved in different directions. Nathan stood up. I'll inform the committee to proceed normally. When he left the office, Alexis rested her hand gently over her stomach again. Her daughter moved softly beneath her palm. You're going to meet a complicated world, Alexis murmured quietly. Weeks passed. Back in Houston, Adam Carter waited. The compliance review from Whitmore Holdings had become the central focus of Carter development. Investors began asking questions. Subcontractors requested reassurance. Derek monitored the company's financial reports daily. Adam tried to remain confident, but uncertainty crept in slowly. One afternoon, Derek walked into Adam's office, carrying a new document. It came from Whitmore Holdings, he said. Adam looked up immediately. What is it? Derek placed the letter on the desk. Final review notice. Adam opened the envelope. The document inside was concise. Whitmore Holdings had completed its compliance review of Carter development. Based on financial instability within the Northside project, the investment committee had voted to restructure the loan agreement. Adam read the key sentence carefully. Whitmore Holdings would assume partial operational oversight of the Northside project to ensure financial stability. Adam looked up. What does that mean? Derek answered carefully. It means they're stepping in. Adam felt his jaw tighten. They can't run my project. They're not taking full control, Derek said, but they'll supervise the financial management. Adam stood and walked toward the window. The construction cranes in the distance suddenly felt farther away than before. He had built Carter Development from the ground up, and now an outside company would be watching every decision. But Adam understood the reality of finance. Lenders held power, and Whitmore Holdings now held the largest share of his company's debt. Meanwhile, in New York, the investment committee gathered for its final meeting. Elena Morales presented the report. The Carter Development project carries moderate risk due to payment delays and liquidity management. Patrick Chen added, however, the underlying real estate value remains strong. Nathan Reed sat quietly at the end of the table. Alexis Turner listened without interrupting. The committee finished reviewing the data. Finally, Elena spoke. Our recommendation is partial operational oversight. Patrick nodded. It protects the investment without forcing default. The committee members looked toward Alexis. As the incoming majority owner of Whitmore Holdings, she had the authority to approve or reject their recommendation. Nathan Reed spoke carefully. The decision is yours. Alexis glanced down at the final report. Everything the committee had proposed was logical, balanced, professional. It would protect the investment while allowing Carter Development to continue operating. Alexis closed the folder. I approve the recommendation. The committee members nodded. The decision was finalized. Later that afternoon, Alexis left the building and walked slowly along a quiet street near Central Park. Autumn had begun to color the trees. Golden leaves drifted across the sidewalk. She walked calmly, one hand resting over her stomach. Her daughter moved gently. Alexis thought briefly about the past few weeks. The Carter family dinner, the small apartment in Houston, the email from Nathan Reed, and the meeting in the Whitmore conference room. None of it felt dramatic now. Life had simply shifted. Across the country, Adam Carter received the oversight notice and understood what it meant. His company would survive, but it would not be entirely his anymore. For the first time since the night he had asked Alexis to leave, Adam found himself thinking about her again. Not as the wife he had dismissed, but as the woman who now stood quietly at the center of the financial structure surrounding his business. And somewhere in New York, Alexis Turner continued walking through the quiet autumn afternoon. She did not feel victorious. She did not feel angry. Because justice, when it finally arrives, is rarely loud. Sometimes it simply changes the balance of power, and then allows everyone to see the truth that had been there all along. Winter arrived quietly in New York. By the time the first light snowfall touched the streets of Manhattan, the legal transfer of the Whitmore estate had been completed. The documents were signed. The trusts were reorganized. And Alexis Turner officially became the majority owner of Whitmore Holdings. The process had taken months of careful legal work. To Alexis, however, it had felt almost calm. She did not treat the transition like a triumph. She treated it like responsibility. Inside the Whitmore headquarters, her new office overlooked the Hudson River. The room was large but simple, furnished with a long desk, several shelves of financial reports, and a wide window that captured the changing light of the city. On most days, Alexis arrived early. She reviewed investment summaries, met with the management team, asked questions about projects she was still learning to understand. The executives who had once approached her cautiously now spoke with respect, not because of the inheritance itself, but because Alexis had proven something during those early months. She listened, she studied the details, and when she made decisions, they were measured. Whitmore Holdings continued operating much as it had under Charles Whitmore. Stable, careful, long-term, Alexis rarely appeared in financial news. She did not enjoy attention. Her focus remained quiet and steady. One snowy morning, Nathan Reed visited her office with a set of updated investment reports. "The North Side project in Houston is progressing again," he said. Alexis looked up from her desk. "Carter Development." "Yes." Nathan placed the file on the desk. "Since Whitmore Holdings implemented financial oversight, the construction schedule has stabilized." Alexis opened the file. Photographs of the nearly completed building filled the report. Glass windows now covered the steel structure. The project was close to opening. "Has the company recovered, financially?" Alexis asked. Nathan nodded, slowly. Alexis closed the folder. "That's good." Nathan watched her for a moment. "You don't seem surprised." Alexis gave a faint smile. Adam was never incompetent. Nathan raised an eyebrow slightly. "You're generous." "I'm accurate," Alexis replied. Adam Carter had never lacked ambition. His mistake had been something else: pride and certainty. Later that afternoon, Alexis left the office early. A quiet doctor's appointment waited across town. The pregnancy had reached its final weeks. The doctor's office was calm and warm compared to the cold air outside. During the examination, the doctor smiled. "Everything looks good," she said. "Your daughter should arrive very soon." Alexis nodded. The word daughter always felt steady and certain. Not disappointing, not inconvenient, just real. 2 weeks later, on a quiet evening as snow fell softly across the city, Alexis Turner gave birth to a baby girl. The hospital room was quiet. The lights were dim. When the nurse placed the baby in her arms, Alexis studied the tiny face carefully. Small fingers, dark hair, curious eyes already opening slightly. "She's beautiful," the nurse said gently. Alexis nodded. Her daughter's presence felt calm and powerful at the same time. "What will you name her?" the nurse asked. Alexis looked down at the child. Clara, she said softly. Clara Whitmore Turner, a name that carried both past and future. Months passed. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Alexis divided her time between Whitmore Holdings and caring for Clara. Her office schedule became more flexible. Meetings were shorter. Work often continued from home. But the company continued to grow steadily. Whitmore Holdings expanded several of its investment portfolios. One of them included a commercial property in Houston, the Northside Complex. Its grand opening arrived in early summer. Adam Carter stood near the entrance of the building watching guests arrive. The project had survived. It had taken longer than expected, and Whitmore Holdings' oversight had forced stricter financial discipline. But the building was complete. Investors shook hands, local officials made speeches, cameras flashed. Adam listened politely, but his thoughts wandered, because somewhere in the background of his success remained a quiet truth. The project had survived largely because Whitmore Holdings had stepped in when the finances grew unstable, and Whitmore Holdings now belonged to Alexis Turner. Later that afternoon, as the crowd thinned, Adam walked toward the parking area. A black car pulled up across the street. For a moment, he didn't pay attention. Then the door opened. Alexis stepped out. She held a small child in her arms. Clara. Adam froze. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The Houston sun reflected softly across the glass windows of the new building. Alexis stood calmly on the sidewalk. She looked different from the night she had left the Carter house. Stronger, more certain, but still quiet. Adam walked toward her slowly. His voice was careful. "You came." Alexis nodded. "I wanted to see the finished project." Adam glanced at the building behind him. It survived. "Yes." He looked at the child in her arms. "Is that my daughter?" Adam swallowed. "Our daughter," he said softly. Alexis did not correct him, but she also did not repeat the word. Clara shifted slightly in her arms. Adam studied the baby's small face. "She's beautiful," he said. Alexis nodded once. For a moment, silence settled between them again. The past lingered in that silence. The dinner, the humiliation, the door closing behind Alexis as she left the Carter house. Adam finally spoke. "I made a mistake." Alexis looked at him calmly. "I know." The simplicity of her answer removed any room for argument. Adam looked toward the ground. "I didn't understand." Alexis shifted Clara gently in her arms. "You understood," she said quietly. "You just chose something else." Adam did not respond. Because that was true. He had chosen legacy, chosen tradition, chosen the idea of a son who would carry his name. And in doing so, he had lost the woman standing in front of him. Alexis turned slightly toward the car. "We should go," she said softly to Clara. Adam watched as she walked back toward the vehicle. Before getting inside, Alexis paused. She looked once more at the completed building behind Adam. "You finished it," she said. Adam nodded. "Yes, that's good." Then she opened the car door. Moments later, the vehicle drove away. Adam remained standing on the sidewalk for a long time. He had wanted a legacy, a son, a continuation of the Carter name, but the life he had pushed away was now moving forward without him. And somewhere on the highway leaving Houston, Alexis Turner held her daughter close, while the city slowly disappeared behind them. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with quiet dignity. In the end, some stories are not about revenge. They are about clarity. Adam Carter believed legacy depended on a son who could carry his name. But legacy is not built through names alone. It is built through character, through respect, through the choices people make when they believe no one important is watching. Alexis Turner never shouted. She never humiliated anyone in return. She never tried to prove her worth through anger. Instead, she did something far more powerful. She walked away, and she built a life where her daughter would grow up knowing that dignity never needs to raise its voice. Sometimes the strongest form of justice is simply moving forward. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to tell us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. Stories like Alexis's remind us that quiet strength often changes the course of a life. And if you'd like to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and unexpected turns of fate, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next one. Thank you for listening.